What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Gen 9 is here. Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are finally out. And as always, the biggest topic of discussion is the new roster of Pokémon they provided. Well, a big topic. There's also the open world and the frame rate data and a bunch of other things, but I wanted to hone in on the new pocket monsters the Paldea region has produced and specifically look into their names and what they mean, since sometimes a name can be tricky and are really the only ways that certain intentions from the developers make it through. So obviously we have the starters of the region, and the grass-type starter Sprigatito is derived from the word sprig, which is a tiny branch, and of course gatito, which is Spanish for a small cat, providing the petite suffix onto the standard gato. So that's simple enough. But, I guess if you want to play the game blind, then I should mention there will be spoilers, because the next Pokemon in the dex is, of course, its evolution, Florigato, having the suffix that we mentioned before, and also Flora, the Latin for flower, but everybody knows that. They then evolve into Meowscarada, mixing the sound that a cat makes with Masquerada, which is Spanish for masquerade. And since that shows up in the Japanese version as well, I think we can safely put this ferocious feline in with some solid company. Then we have my favorite starter this gen with Fuecoco, with its name coming from fuego, of course being Spanish for fire, and coco, which comes from the Spanish for crocodile, since they don't use that first R at the beginning. However, the R does appear when it evolves into Crocalor, and of course calor is heat in Spanish. But then they evolve into their final form, Skeledirge, who is the best, but its name is clearly drawn from the skeleton-style Day of the Dead face, and also dirge, which is a kind of sad song that you would perform at a funeral. I wasn't sure that's what they were going for, but the signature singing move of this Pokemon and the new ghost type make it pretty clear. And lastly, I'm not really a huge fan of Quaxly's design, or its name really, since it's just kind of a lazy version of the sound that a duck makes, but making it into an adverb, I guess. Some people claim that it has to do with wax, like for fancy hair, but I don't know that I buy that, not in the English version at least, maybe if it were spelled with a W. So then our waterfowl evolves into Quaxwell, who is a little weird. It could be that it performs well at quacking, or perhaps it's from swell, as you would find in the ocean. That could work, seeing as how the final stage, Quaquaval, has the word aqua right in the middle of it, sounds like you are quacking twice, and then also for good measure throws in a carnival at the end. And that is supported by other languages doing the same thing, so this dancer Pokemon clearly performs in a wandering show of some kind. Then of course there's Lechonk being a bit more involved. There is the Lechon part, which has to do with a piglet in Spanish, but then there's Chonk, which is a sort of internet slang for being overweight, so this Pokemon is right on the money. But then it takes a turn evolving into Oinkalone, and it's not because this Pokemon is alone, but it is spelled like cologne, and it is stated what a pleasant aroma these Pokemon have. So they're doing a lot to displace the stereotype of pigs being incredibly dirty. Then I don't know what we have with Dunsparce. I mean, it's really only that way because the Pokemon repeats, so they thought the name should repeat too? You could maybe argue that it has something like dual or duo that they're kind of going for, but at the very least, you can say its name in a funny way with Dunsparce. Then there's Tarantula, which obviously comes from the tarantula spider, with the word round thrown in the middle to reference the big ball of webbing that covers its whole body. But when it evolves, Spidops, I guess, becomes an elite soldier because it's just a spider that does special ops. I'm not sure that was what the design intention was, but that's the name they went for, so I guess we'll be seeing it in the military. Nimble is a great name because it's just the word nimble, meaning agile, but the first part is spelled like nymph, which is perfect for this cute, unassuming bug. However, it then evolves to Lowkicks, which sounds like locusts, but also low kick, and a cheap shot like that is something that you could expect from a now dark type with powerful legs. And it actually does learn the move, so bravo for the consistency. Relore was a weird one until I realized that it was just the word roller backwards, since it's always rolling around its ball of mud. But I only put that together after seeing its evolution, Rabska, and realized that it was just the word scarab with the front and back swapped. Because if you spelled the word scarab backwards, it would be barracks, and that's a whole other thing. Grievard comes next, seemingly with a combination of grieving and graveyard, which is fitting for a ghost type like this, but also apparently greaves were once a leftover result of candle making, which would totally fit with this vibe, so you learn something new every day. Then Houndstone is pretty obviously just the word headstone like you would find in a graveyard, with hound in front of it. Perfect for this phantom canine come back from the grave. Next is the new Pokemon Flittle, and the psychic type seems to grab its name from Flitter due to its light, airy movements, and Little due to its size. But when it evolves into Espathra, it's more complicated, taking the ESP prefix that we've seen often, combining it with some telepathy in the middle, and hey, why not throw in some Cleopatra to tie it all together? Her name is present in just about every other language, so I think that is the case, and good luck taming this independent ostrich. Okay, then we got Farigiraf, and obviously its name is once again a palindrome based around the word giraffe, just like Giraffe Rig, but why? It used to make sense back when the Pokémon was the same forwards and backwards, but it's not anymore. I understand the naming convention, I just don't know why they thought it applied when both heads faced the same direction. Not quite a regional variant, we have Wiglet, and obviously its name is a derivative of Diglett, with it looking very similar, but it's not about wigs, more in line with Wiggle due to its elongated, thinner body. If it were based on wigs, we would be back with the Alolan version. And then, silly me, I made a Wugtrio joke a few weeks ago, but I should have known better because they actually did it, so that's just Dugtrio's name but with a W for water, I guess? Dondozo is a weird one, from Don, meaning Lord, and Dozo, which is a Japanese phrase that basically means help yourself, usually related to food. And given its look of a sushi chef and its signature move Order Up, I think that's what they were going for. I'm also not going to rule out Bozo, since apparently this Pokemon is not that smart. Veluza is another one-off Pokemon whose name likely stems from velocity due to its high speeds, and Merluza, which is the Spanish name of the fish on which it is based. Finizen is the dolphin Pokemon everyone was waiting for, with its name combining the word Fin with denizen, meaning a resident or citizen. And then it evolves to Palafin, which again takes the word Fin, this time combining it with Paladin, because this Pokemon takes its job as a superhero very seriously. Smoliv is another in a long line of food Pokemon, and of course its name comes from it being a small olive. That's it. Easy enough. Then it evolves into Dolliv, which combines olive with doll, kinda sounds like dollop as well, but that's a different kind of food. And then the final form, Arboliva, brings in arbor for trees, along with possibly the word diva, and given her look, I wouldn't doubt it, all while keeping alive the word olive in the middle. The new grass type, Capsakid, is not a regional Cranidos. In fact, it is a mixture of capsaicin, which is what makes peppers spicy, and of course kid because it is in fact a baby. When it evolves, Scovillain is a combination of the Scoville scale, which is how the hotness of peppers are measured, and villain because I guess they're evil too? So if you're not really into peppers, it would be easy for these ones to go over your head. But next is Tadbulb, which is a great, simple name throwing together Tadpole and Lightbulb, so very solid all around, and it becomes Bellibolt, which is obviously belly and bolt, since the electricity comes from its stomach, possibly also sounding like belly button because that's where the electricity is concentrated. The new Pokemon Varoom is obviously a play on the automatopoeia of a car, commonly spelled vroom, and of course its evolution, Revaroom, takes the same concept but adds a revving of an engine at the beginning. Orthworm is clearly an earthworm, but also likely with the word or in the front. It's just a shame that it's not a ground type. Then there's Tandemouse, which is actually kind of genius, since it combines tandem, you know, like a tandem bicycle, and mouse. It also kind of sounds like Tantamount, but I don't know if that's relevant here. Then they evolve into Mousehold, once again taking mouse and putting it with household, which is everyone who lives under the same roof. One of the new Pokemon that I really like specifically because of its name is Cetitan. This bipedal ice whale is named after cetacean, which is the classification of whales, like how equine is for horses, and of course, it's big and powerful enough to be called a titan. So it's a great combination that rolls right off the tongue, but it's also got a pre-evolution Citadel, which isn't quite as cool because it's just using a toddler instead. Frigibax is next, and this weird little guy is named for its frigid tendencies as well as its back, since apparently its back fin is very important to its biology. We see this more clearly when it evolves into Arctibax, again combining backs with the cold, this time the Arctic. But then it evolves into Baxcalibur, which is back combined with Excalibur, the legendary sword of King Arthur. Not the Sword in the Stone, that's a different one, very important. But it's not even a steel type, so I don't exactly know what they were trying to go for with this one. Tatsugiri is next, and this weird little guy comes from Tatsu, which is Japanese for dragon, and Nigiri sushi, which is a type of sushi, and also this actually explains its relationship with Dondozo, which you wouldn't otherwise understand. We knew Cyclizar before going into these games, and it is of course a combination of Cycle and Lizard, which are both very present, and we can all agree that it is a much better normal and dragon type than Drampa ever could be. I do not really care for Palmy, but it comes from the word paw, or perhaps even palm, because of the electricity in its hands, and likely Nezumi, which is the Japanese name for a mouse. Pomo is exactly the same, except maybe with dynamo, since apparently that word is a lot more connected to electricity than I ever knew. And finally Pomot, whose name is drawn from the marmot, the large ground rodent on which this weirdo happens to be based. Much better to me is the bird Wattrel, which is a portmanteau of Petrel, the bird on which this Pokemon is based, and Watt, the unit of electricity. And even more clever is its evolution, Kilowattrel, being the exact same, except kilowatts are much more powerful, so everything here is just very satisfying. Then Bombardier is pretty self-explanatory. This is a bird who is a bombardier, constantly dropping things out of the sky. Its friend Squawkabilly is of course named for the squawk, but also Rockabilly, which is an early style of rock music that totally matches the hair and all of the different colors that it has. And of course the one that everyone was waiting for, Flamigo, which is of course just the word flamingo, but removing a single letter to make the word amigo as well, because even though it is a fighting type, it can still be your very good friend. I actually didn't get Cloth at first, which is why videos like this are important. The claw part of the name was apparent because it's a crab, but it also sounds like cliff because that's where this Pokemon resides. And truthfully, I love the idea of a pure rock crab. I still don't really know how to pronounce Nacli, and I didn't even know what it meant until the deck said that it was made of salt. Now it's genius! As you likely know, common table salt is sodium chloride, and when you look over at the periodic table, sodium and chlorine are represented by Na and Cl respectively, so that's great. The I might just be because it's small, I guess. It then becomes Naclistack, which is the same root, but this time there's a stack of them, and then Garganical, which is the same but gargantuan. Don't you just love science? I'm gonna go ahead and take their word for it that Glimmet is in fact a Pokemon. At any rate, its name is a bit unclear. The most likely answer is that it's from Glimmer because of the crystal aspects, and Et just makes it small. Then it evolves into Glimmora, which could be Glimmer and Flora, which just makes it even more confusing because it's not actually a grass type. Shroodle is interesting since it could either be from shrew as a small animal, but also shrewd in its demeanor, or perhaps both. And then of course Doodle, since it does like to draw. This carries over into its evolution Graphii, who is of course so named because it is an ii-based animal that does graffiti. Fido is pretty easy. It comes from the common dog name Fido, which comes from the Latin word to trust, so that's an appropriate name for man's best friend, but also the word dough at the end of the name coming from the fact that this canine is in fact a baked good. Duckspin then takes the dachshund name of the dog breed and just adds the word bun, and in doing so kind of looks like a bred version of our canine. Mastiff is in a similar boat, mixing the dog breed Mastiff with the word mischief. And then this is repeated again in its second form, Mabostiff, taking the same breed but becoming a boss this time. Bramblin comes as a combination of bramble and rambling, but rather than talking too much, this is the definition of rambling that means wandering about aimlessly, since they do get blown around all the time. And of course, Bramblegast is bramble with gast, an old-timey way to say ghost, you know, like Sandygast. Honestly, that one's kind of a letdown. I was expecting more after the first name in this line. Gimmighoul is pretty straightforward. It's a greedy ghost Pokemon, so it's a ghoul that has a gimme mindset. And then it evolves into Goldingo, which sources say seems to just be golden and ghost put together, but I'm not convinced that there's not a hint of a Wendigo somewhere in that name, so I'll let you decide for yourself. I'm not really gonna do the paradox forms, since even a small child can figure out what those names mean. So then Tinkatink comes next, which is derived from Tinker due to its foraging capabilities, and possibly Pink, although it could just be even more tinkering at the end of the name. Of course, the next one is Tinkatuff, which is exactly the same, but, you know, it's tougher than it was before, and then it evolves again into Tinkaton, who takes this to the extreme with the suffix from Gigaton, since its signature move is Gigaton Hammer. Charcadet is next, and it is said to be a charcoal that has come to life, so combine that with Cadet, and you've got yourself a Pokemon name. The first half of its version-exclusive evolutions, Armarouge is a portmanteau of the armor that makes up its body, and Rouge bringing in the deep red color. And to me, this one is a much more pleasing name, but I do prefer the design of Ceruledge. This Pokemon drawing on the opposing cerulean color for its armor, and then Edge, I guess because of its blade arms, but that does make sense because Honedge also shares in this trait, so I guess edge is just a sword word for Pokemon. Now we've got some more not regional variants with Toedscool, which is just a tentacool but with toadstool at the front, because, you know, it's a mushroom now. And then of course that means it evolves into Toedscruel, who is also a fungus version of a Pokemon that we have known for many years. What I was not expecting was the new Bisharp evolution, Kingambit. This, of course, being a play off of King, the most crucial chess piece on the board that will lose the game when taken, and Gambit, referring to the clever strategies used to win such games. It still kinda bums me out that there's not a split gender-specific Queen evolution as well, though. We knew that Poison Wooper would be here, but now it evolves into Clodsire, using the same ending from Quagsire, but now with Clod, which could mean a lump of dirt, but it was already a ground type before, so maybe it's the double meaning of the word and the spiny fish is not all that bright. Now of all things, Primeape gets to evolve to become Annihilape, which is just perfect. And also clearly the word annihilate with ape tacked onto the end, letting you know just how any fight would go. Now I've saved the legendaries for last. Koraidon comes from Korai, meaning ancient in Japanese, Raido, to ride, and then Don at the end, likely drawing from dinosaur names, but also Lord. Also, you know, it's a pun because you ride on Koraidon. Anyway, Miraidon is exactly the same, but Mirai means future this time, so I think we get the idea that they were going for. But then the other ones that we didn't know about are all a bit different, all seemingly drawing from Chinese inspirations, starting with Ting Lu, whose name combines the words for an ancient Chinese cauldron, the one that it wears on its head, and the word for deer. So this rock type is actually quite similar to Terrakion. But the other legends follow this naming convention, with Qian Pao taking approximations for the Chinese words for sword and leopard, as you can quite clearly see in its design. Then Woqian once again uses the words for snail and a corruption of bamboo, and finally Chiyu is a little different, since it sounds like the word for goldfish, but the word jade could also be in the second half, pointing to the jewelry that this molten fish seems to be made up of. So I'm sure I murdered some of those pronunciations, but those are your legendary Pokemon, at least for now. If they follow recent trends, I'm sure we'll be getting more this generation. But those are all the names of the Pokemon introduced in Scarlet and Violet, and what they mean. Even if you might not like a certain Pokemon's design, you can at least appreciate the trouble that they took in giving this creature a specific name that they'll have for the rest of time. What's your favorite new Pokemon name? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.